Part 25. Mail check. Paris, California, 1:23 p.m. The T-1000 had parked the police cycle off the side of a quiet empty road near a shriveled grove of water-hungry orange trees. A ribbon of traffic moved by steadily on a freeway in the distance. Some pump jacks were sucking oil out of the earth on the brown hill behind it. The T-1000 scanned the return addresses on John's letters. He had checked all but the last. Sharon Mesa, California. Sooner rather than later. To the liquefied brain, this world was a simple puzzle box of broken reality, the hard pieces easily fitting back into the river of cosmic order. Cause and effect was the closest thing to humour in a mind so alien even a Terminator would have difficulty comprehending it. It had deduced several possible avenues of continuing the pursuit. It was methodically following one, while constantly processing the others. First priority was to investigate all the addresses on the envelopes. Next, deduce from externalizations of analogous evidence what the target's next move would be, and move to intercept. And third, lie in wait for years if necessary, accumulating microscopic bits of information as to their whereabouts. The T-1000 was programmed with enough history to know when the war happened, and where John Connor was likely to be in the beginning stages. John Connor would eventually show himself, and the T-1000 would be there. Skynet itself had hesitated before making this latest weapon. There were unpredictability factors relating to the thing's longevity and ability to process commands without interpolating its own priorities. It was so volatile a construct that only in the last throes of utter defeat, when the plug was about to be pulled, had Skynet sent the Terminators through time to change the outcome of the war. And only in the very last microsecond before shutdown had the hypercomputer sent the T-1000. Einstein had said once that God didn't play dice with the universe. Skynet had no choice. The T-1000 revved the engine. The Kawasaki 1100 quickly accelerated out onto the highway, doing about 120. It was a metal blur, moving almost out of time, on a track of its own, that led directly to its target. The Anvil of Will. Salcedo's Camp, 5:56 p.m. Sarah was sitting at a weathered picnic table. The weapons had been clean and her work done. She took a breath, feeling the weight of the whole world on her shoulders. The sun was going down. On so many things. She drew her knife from its belt sheath, idly started to carve something on the tabletop. The letter N. John and the Terminator were finishing up packing the Bronco for the trip. Sarah looked up from her carving, watching Salcedo's kids playing nearby, wrestling with a mutti dog and loving it. Yolanda came out of a trailer, walking her toddler by the hands. Here was the balance. In this armed camp there was unity, love, benevolence, tenderness. The balance she seemed to lack. There was only so much she could do, cope with. No human had ever done what she had. How could she not make mistakes? But as she watched Salcedo hurry over to lift his child into the air, flying him around as if Paco were a human bird, she glanced back at John glumly loading guns and supplies. Behind him, the other kids frolicked, their laughter unrestrained, their bodies flailing in a frenzied freedom that John's had never known. The sun was glaring right into her eyes. They were stinging. She wiped at them absently, feeling the moisture on the back of her hand. The pain was too great. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. That was a mistake. She was back in that playground, and Salcedo's children were there, with the others, playing with that freedom born of trust that their parents were not insane enough to cremate themselves, whirling on swings, slipping down slides, and giggling through the jungle gym. The grass was vibrant green, and the sun was not hurtfully hot, but warm and nurturing. Sarah hooked her fingers into the chain-link fence. She was staring at the young mothers playing with their kids. Little girls played skip rope, their sing-song chant weaved through the random burbling of the kids. One young mother appeared, walking her 2-year-old son by the hands. She was wearing a pink and white waitress uniform. She turned, a cheerful smile on her lips. It was herself. Beautiful, radiant. The Sarah uncontaminated by the dark future. She glanced at this strange doppelganger beyond the fence. She knew it was coming, like the hammer blow of God. Grim-faced, Sarah pressed against the fence. She started shouting at them, but no sound came from her mouth. She clutched the fence in frustration, shaking it, screaming soundlessly. The waitress Sarah's smile fell away, like leaves in gathering autumn, and for a moment their eyes met across the timeless gulf. But she turned away, her smile returning when her little boy gurgled and threw a fistful of sand at her. She laughed heartily, forgetting the Sarah at the fence, as if she were only a shadow, a trick of the light. The bright blue sky suddenly blossomed into an unearthly white. The children ignited like match heads. Sarah was burning, screaming silently, writhing in the repeating loop of her own hell. The blast wave hit, devouring the cowering mothers and their children in a whirl of hate. Sarah's scream merged with the howl of the wind as the shockwave ripped into her, blasting her apart, and she jerked her head up, gaping at the horizon. Scrub-brush-dotted hills. The darkening sky, all purple with dusk. The children were still playing nearby. Sarah glanced at her wristwatch. Less than 15 minutes had gone by. Bathed in perspiration, Sarah hunched over the table. She ran her hand through her soaked hair. Every muscle was shaking. It was hard to breathe. So hard. She could escape from the hospital, but not from the madness that haunted her. It seemed to Sarah that fate, or destiny, or some kind of cosmic pattern, was a real, living entity, imposing order to all things. Time itself was only one aspect of this order, like an artery running through the body of the universe through which events flowed. And maybe people were cells in that body, not knowing what the universe was precisely, but subject to its functions. Cells. Even only a single cell could, if found in the right place at the right time, initiate changes in the body that were far-reaching. And maybe that was all part of the cosmic order, a preordained pattern of cells that made individual decisions, choosing their own immediate destiny within the body of the whole. But she knew also that she could never know the truth and falsehood of such an idea. She was grasping at straws in a hurricane. Whether they believed in a controlling deity, or in some random forces making the universe dance blindly in some gargantuan blender, all she could know was the momentary order of things, the temporal cause and effect of her own actions. And of course, every waking action was filled with unpredictable possibilities. Unless, of course, dreams were bits and pieces of the pattern, coming at us all at once in the night, in a blinding burst of psychic sight, to be patterned back into our waking minds. Until mankind learned how to see across time in both directions, or rather, out of time, they had to gamble that their actions were going to come out all right, in the end. It was humanity's curse to be aware of itself and to know the limits of its awareness. People played dice with the universe too. In 1,000 little ways, in all the small, trivial choices that people were compelled by forces beyond their control to make every second of their lives, people expressed their wills. It was their choices, and even when the behaviour of some seemed to be most predictable, There could be surprises, unexpected choices, unexpected consequences. And now fate was inviting her to embrace and dance again, to choose several paths among a multiplicity, to strike at the heart of destiny itself, to fold it back in on itself like a flower closing up for the night. Sarah was going to end the loop. She looked down at the words she had carved on the table, amid the scrawled hearts and bird droppings. No fate. No fate but what we make for ourselves. Kyle had given her that message from the uptime John Connor. He should have known. Besides, the first Terminator and the T-1000 were proof that Skynet thought it could change the past. Why couldn't she change the future? She slammed her knife into the tabletop, embedding it deeply into the word fate, then stood up and turned to go. Sarah strode across the compound with grim purpose, carrying a small nylon pack and a Car-15 assault rifle. Her face was set, committed, an impassive mask. She had become a Terminator. John glanced up from his work at the Bronco in time to see Sarah throw the rifle behind the seat of their stolen station wagon, jump in, and start it. Salcedo walked up to John. "She said you should go south with him." He pointed at the Terminator standing nearby. "Tonight, like you planned. She will meet you tomorrow in..." Sarah jammed the car in gear and it lurched forward. John suddenly bolted across the yard, running after her. "Mom! Wait!" Sarah heard her son and glanced in the rearview mirror. He was a rapidly dwindling figure, yelling after her. She turned onto the gravel road and drove away from the compound, dust marking her passage. When she reached the highway, she turned onto it and accelerated to 75. Until she reached her target, she wouldn't slow down. John and the Terminator pondered the message carved into the top of the picnic table. Sarah's knife was still embedded there. No fate but what we make. My father told her this. I made him memorize it, up in the future, as a message to her. Time disorientation again. The brain-tangling perplexities of time paradox. "Never mind," John said, giving up. "Okay, the whole thing goes. The future is not set. There is no fate but what we make for ourselves." The Terminator had no trouble interpreting this information. The subtextual cues and free associations were increasing exponentially. All he said, however, was, "She intends to change the future somehow." "What? How?" "Unknown." John snapped his fingers as it hit him. "Oh, shit!" Dyson. The Terminator waited with the patience of a clock. John was dancing around, more scared than he had been in the previous 2 days. "Yeah, it's gotta be! Miles Dyson! She's gonna blow him away!" John motioned to the Terminator to follow him as he broke into a run. "Come on, let's go! Let's go!" The Terminator hesitated 1 second, processing. Then it corroborated what John had said. It was as good as fact. Sarah Jeanette Connor was on a mission of death. The Terminator started running, easily overtaking John and jumping behind the wheel of the Bronco. Already several miles ahead, Sarah sped through the darkening desert, expressionless. In her dark glasses, she looked as pitiless as an insect. The Terminator and John headed towards LA, the cyborg coolly whipping the bulky Bronco, which was overloaded with heavy artillery, around slower traffic. He could sense radar scans, so whenever a police beam was detected, he would slow to precisely the speed limit until out of range. They couldn't afford to get stopped now. The Terminator made his first pronouncement of the evening. "This is tactically dangerous." John anxiously glanced over and said, "Drive faster." "The T-1000 has the same files that I do. It could anticipate this move and reacquire you at Dyson's house." "I don't care! We've got to stop her!" The Terminator had come to the same conclusion the T-1000 probably had. Killing Dyson might actually prevent the war. In frustration, John punched the seat next to the cyborg. "I don't care! There's got to be another way! Haven't you learned anything? Haven't you figured out why you can't kill people?" The Terminator made no response. "Look, maybe you don't care if you live or die, but everybody's not like that, okay? We have feelings, we hurt, we're afraid. You gotta learn this stuff, man. I'm not kidding. It's important." They crested the pass, and below them lay the mega sprawl of the city, all lit up for night fun.